We all love stories. We read them to our kids at night. We watch them in movie theaters or binge them on Netflix. We read them in books. We see them in plays, and we tell them around campfires. However, I think that we often forget that our very lives tell a story that is read by the people around us, whether it be our children, our friends, our parents, or simply the barista at Starbucks. If you think about someone you really admire, whether it be an actress, author, or mentor in your life, you probably don't just think about one moment. Instead, your mind reflects on their story, how they grew up, the obstacles they faced, and the choices that they have made. Each one of our lives speaks of something. It tells a narrative based on who we are, what we love, the places we go, the things we see, and the moments that we experience. But most importantly, it speaks through our choices that we make, the ones that determine our beliefs and values, the choices that determine where our story goes and how it plays out. We do not always get to choose what happens to us or the circumstances surrounding our story, but we do get to decide how we react to them. This year, I was faced with a choice in my own story, a choice that would lay the groundwork for character transformation. This year, my summer began like any other. I was working as an orientation leader here at UC Blue Ash, at a job at a retail store, and plans for trips with friends. But one morning, while house sitting, I woke up to a knock on the door. I opened it to find my mom standing outside alone, sunglasses covering her eyes and lips failing as she tried to smile. I knew right away that something was wrong. All the possibilities raced through my head. What had gone wrong? Looking me in the eye, she spoke the words that would forever change my life. She said that my sister had been driving home from work late the night before, had lost control of her car, drove into the median, her car flipping multiple times, eventually ejecting her from the seat. She died on impact. I cannot properly describe what my heart felt in that moment. It was heartbreaking pain, denial, and shock all at once. I stood there stunned, not believing it could be possible. That whole week became a process of family coming into town and funeral arrangements being made. It wasn't until the funeral was over and everyone was going back to their lives that the shock began to fade, and in its place settled a deep ache. I was left wondering, what now? What do you do when your life turns upside down? If I simply listened to the facts and circumstances of that moment, I'd be facing a life that told the story of pain, depression, and loneliness. Yet even in the midst of my heartbreak, I knew I didn't want these to be the words that defined my life. I had not asked for my sister to die, and I could not change what had happened. But I didn't want to let what I couldn't control define where my story went. The only thing that I could do was choose how I would let this experience change me. I wanted it to be someone full of joy, love, and hope. Someone whose life reminded others that even in the darkest places, there is light. But in order to shape my story into one of hope, I was going to need to make room for character transformation. Donald Miller is a famous speaker and writer who talks about the stories that our lives tell. He describes them by saying that if the point of life is the same as the point of a story, the point of life is character transformation. Therefore, I could not stay the same way that I was. I either had to become a lesser version of myself or choose to allow the pain to grow me. Looking back over the past year, I believe that while I have learned a lot, there are two main truths that I've come to embrace. The first, that having a vulnerable and open heart is necessary for strength. And the second is the importance of seeing life through eyes of gratitude. Both of these things were parts of my character that needed to be transformed in order for my story to take shape. Learning to be vulnerable was and is by far the hardest of the two. Brené Brown, a researcher on human connection, says that vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, empathy, and creativity. I don't know about you, but this is not how I have always seen vulnerability. I had some experiences growing up that led me to believe that I needed to be independent and protect my heart. I thought by being self-reliant, I was being strong. I lived in a place of self-protection and extreme independence. I loved being there for others in their brokenness, but the idea of allowing someone else to do the same for me was far from my comfort zone. Perhaps you can relate. Yet it became abundantly clear that I was holding on to a false idea of what real strength was. I realized that if I wanted a story that told of love and joy, I needed to be willing to step out with an open heart, unafraid to be seen. There's one night in particular that stands out to me when my eyes were open to the beauty that vulnerability can bring. My friends and I were spending the day together, playing games and laughing and talking. It felt wonderful to have a day full of laughter in a season of grief. However, as the night continued, the sorrow in my heart began to rise to the surface. And before I knew it, I was starting to cry uncontrollably. I quickly ran outside, thinking that what I needed was to be alone. Yet despite the fact that I had just run away like I was being attacked by a swarm of bees, my friend came outside, sat beside me on the cement driveway, and was simply there as I cried. Her presence in that moment was like a healing balm that my soul needed. It was a reminder that I was not alone and that the world had not yet ended. It was the first of many moments where I was reminded that although hiding my heart was safer, it also protected me from the deep connection of acceptance that all of our souls were created for. I learned that extreme independence to the point of not allowing others into the broken places of my heart wasn't real strength at all. Instead, it was fear. True strength is allowing people to see you when you are broken and giving them the opportunity to show up in your life. Brené Brown says that courage is the willingness to show up and be seen. Vulnerability didn't make me weak. In fact, it made me stronger. When I faced moments where the heaviness of loss was pulling me down to the point of giving up, I could now call upon the people in my life to remind me that I was not alone, giving me the courage to keep going. No longer did my story need to speak of loneliness. Instead, it began to paint a picture of love and acceptance. The second truth that I've learned is that gratitude opens the door to joy. When life brings hardships, the first thing to enter my heart is not gratitude. Instead, I see everything that is wrong, lost, or broken. My mind becomes overshadowed with negativity. The pain in that moment reminds me of all the pain I have felt in the past. It is no longer isolated to a certain event. Instead, it pervades into every memory and every season of life, drawing out all of the bad, yet conveniently forgetting the good. We don't have to try very hard to see the darkest things in life. However, it takes a lot more mental energy to focus on what is good, to focus on what we have been given rather than what we have lost. I've had many days this year when all I could see was the darkness. I felt like I so often was walking around like I had a heavy weight tied to my heart. I cried more this year than I ever have in my entire life. I knew that some of this was good. I needed to grieve. If I didn't, something was probably wrong. But I didn't want the rest of my life to tell a story of grief and pain without hope. I wanted to be able to find joy again. So one night, I began to write a list of all the things that I was grateful for. I'd heard people of doing this before and honestly thought it was a little unrealistic and cheesy. I mean, how can you expect to write down everything in your life that you're grateful for without the important aspects of life getting lost in things like grass and trees? But despite my preconceived judgments on gratitude lists, I began to write. The first couple items on my list were my home, my bed, and the fact that I had more than one outfit in my closet. However, slowly, the things I wrote down became more meaningful and important to me, like the fact that I have a wise and encouraging mother, that my brother is hilarious and my best friend, that I have a community of friends and family who love me, that I live in America where I've been given so much freedom, that I have a faith that fills me with hope, and that I have dreams and passions that I can pursue. As I began writing down all of these things, I could literally feel the heaviness in my heart begin to lift. I sat there alone on my bed with a huge smile on my face, overwhelmed with the joy of all that I had been given. What I had written down did not even scratch the surface of all that I have, but it held the things that were most important to me. So I grabbed some tape, stuck it to the wall next to the door in my room so that I could see it every time I left my house, every night before I went to bed, and every morning when I woke up. I still have it hanging there so that even on those days that are darkest, I can be reminded of all the light that is in my life. Whenever I am tempted to be consumed by negativity, I pray that God would open my eyes to see the beauty that is in my life. I'm not all that I want to be. I am still becoming the person I dream of. Like Donald Miller says, our entire lives are a process of character transformation. However, I do pray that when others read my story, they see a life that is full of hope, joy, and light in the darkness. I don't know what everyone in this room is going through today, and I'm sure none of our lives are perfect. But what I do know is that each and every one of us has an opportunity to tell a beautiful story that inspires those around us who read it. So what story do you want to tell? I want to thank everyone who nominated and selected me for this award, as well as Sarah Wolf and Dr. Hyung and all of my professors who've been so amazing and supportive. I want to thank my friends and family who have been there for me and given me the strength that I've needed, God who has turned my darkness into light, and my sister who even after passing away has taught me so much about life. Thank you so much.